along comes Jimmy Carter, who's a complete Washington outsider. Peanuts, Georgia.
Yeah, and Jimmy Carter. I remember. Now that was '76. He was elected in '76, and I was in Buffalo in '75, a year earlier. And I look out the window of the hotel. I vaguely knew who Jimmy Carter was. Vaguely. I might have known he was the governor of Georgia. And there in the snow-filled parking lot is a car with a sign on the side, Jimmy Carter for president. And I thought, how pathetic is that? In this cold, it just symbolizes the chances this guy has of being president. Whose car does that belong to? It was maybe his only supporter in Buffalo. Somebody raising money, who knows? But he arrived in town, and they were yokels, they were hillbillies. It was Billy Carter and Miss Lillian. And boy, I milked that for all it was worth. That was so obvious. You just couldn't avoid it. And Pat Oliphant, the cartoonist, had a cartoon. It wasn't the size of a normal editorial cartoon. It was the Washington Star newspaper, and they used about a half a page, and it showed the Carter White House. This is what the Carter White House is going to be like. And there's the car up on cinder blocks, and there's the tire swing, and there's the chickens running around, and there's Mammy Yoakum smoking her pipe, and all of this. And Oliphant claims he got 5,000 angry letters.
No kidding.
They wanted his head. And so the Southerners, see, even though the Southerners were all Republicans, and they didn't like Carter. Even if Carter was a Democrat, he was governor of Georgia, but Carter did not carry the South. Ford carried the South because he was a Republican. But the Republicans, or the Southerners, just because they were Southerners, not because they were Republicans, they didn't like that corn pone reference there. But that was fair. That was fair. The irony was, he's an engineer. He went to Annapolis. What, he was an atomic engineer, something like that? Yes, he was a peanut farmer. So Billy became the target. Billy Carter became the target. And he did. He had a gas station in Plains, Georgia. And he was not the teetotaler that his Baptist brother was. He was a beer drinker. And I have a great picture of Billy Carter and I were at this banquet, and we're both speaking to this group. And this was at the height of Billy's beer drinking notoriety. And I never saw a guy open a can of beer like that. It was sleight of hand. It was like a magician palming cards. I swear he got that can open without pulling on the tab. It was so quick. You have to pull on the tab to open the beer, but he did it so quick it looked like a magician. But anyway, then it got serious. He had a drinking problem, and it wasn't funny anymore, and then he died. But when he was still funny, I flew into Atlanta one day, and there were people on the plane. It turned out to be they were from Libya. They were from Washington. Well, you're on a plane in Washington, there was a lot of foreign people on the plane, diplomats. And we land at the airport in Atlanta, and these diplomats don't wait till we get up to the gate and get off like everybody else. We stop on the tarmac, and they let them out, and they go downstairs. Now that's real VIP treatment. And waiting at the bottom of the ladder was a limousine and Billy Carter. And it later came out that Billy Carter was a registered lobbyist for Libya, which meant Muammar Gaddafi. Well, they seduced him into that, I don't know why. This was before we bombed Libya. We blamed the Libyans for bombing a GI disco in Germany, remember that? And then we retaliated and we bombed Libya, and that set it off between the United States and Libya for many years. And so here's the brother of the president, and he's now a lobbyist for Libya. And that was unbelievable. So we had the gas station was the new Libya consulate, and all of those references. And it was another prize-winning photograph was Amy Carter going to public school in Washington, D.C. I believe. Yes, the last presidential child. The Clinton daughter went to Sidwell Friends private school in high school. But Amy Carter went to a public school in the District of Columbia, and there's this gut-wrenching photograph of, she's in the first grade or something. She's 6 or 7. And there's 150 cameras zoomed down at this poor kid. And this has been a presidential child who has been successful in maintaining privacy. Because I don't recall, now she's got to be in her 30s now, or more. And I'd be interested, that'd be a good interview. What did that do to you, Amy? That moment.
You really never hear of her.
No.
George Bush.
Which one?
Well, let's back up. Also, I got to believe part of the parody that you have is the number of outsiders who Jimmy Carter imported, who had no clue about where the men's room was in Washington. Just this influx of the Burt Vances.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing that happens when the Carter people came in, and this is not the only president where this happened, but they come up from Georgia, and there was Burt Lance and Jody Powell. Jody Powell, I think, is still in Washington, and Burt Lance, the banker, Calhoun, Georgia. He got in some kind of an ethical problem. And with the Calhoun Bank. For your financial needs, come thank the friendly folks at the Calhoun Bank. Come on in and sit on a log and pet the examiner's seeing eye dog. I remember that. That was relevant at the time. It was fairly amusing at the time. This bank got a pass, got a free pass. It was from the federal government, and Burt Lance was a close personal friend of Jimmy Carter. And then these guys always write books, these people who write books. And the books always have these titles like, My Side of the Story. Now it's my turn to get it out, my side. And they have titles like that. And then they write another book entitled Prison Reform Now, because maybe they're going to the pokey. But anyway, they arrive in Washington, and where do they live? They live in Georgetown. Now these are not wealthy people, but all of us, they don't live out in the suburbs, Virginia and Maryland, White House staffers. Somebody's paying for that. Sometimes they get caught, like with the Congressman Duke Cunningham, who had all these Rolls Royces and a boat and everything. Jim Trafficant, still in federal custody from Ohio. But White House staffers, invariably, they live in Georgetown. $1 million townhouses about this wide. it just goes with the gig, I guess. But that's the way it is.
When Carter and company lose to Bush, were you saddened by the fact that that piece of the puzzle and the Jimmy Carter caricature, if you will, it was gone? Was that another era ending?
Yeah, let me see if I can get the Carter left the White House.
Excuse me, I meant Reagan.
What?
Yeah, Carter was 76. He lost to 1980 to Reagan.
Yes.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to Reagan yet.
So Carter loses. Oh, you're going from...
I skipped.
You skipped a president.
I shouldn't have done that. In fact, if I don't stop now to plug in...
I'm holding back my laugh because I don't want to ruin your tape.
No, that's fine. President Reagan rolls into town. We have an actor. We have president of the union, the Actors Equity Union at some point, a former governor, and he rolls in with a whole new world and Republicans and wealth. And
Well, Carter left office, and one of the reasons he lost to Reagan was that the economy. It was the economy, and it was. We were in a recession, and he never recovered from the gas lines and the hostages in Iran. When Carter left office, the deficit was $60 billion, 6-0. And the Republicans said, this is outrageous. Okay. So what I was saying was, deficit of $60 billion, the Republicans come in, this is outrageous. We can triple that in no time. And they did. In 5 years, it has grown as much as it had from George Washington to Ronald Reagan. And then in the next 5 years, that much. That was the increase in the deficit. And so the first couple of years for Reagan we were still in that recession, and they were cutting the budget like crazy and slashing everything. And Tip O'Neill it was an odd relationship that he had with Reagan. Okay, Irish Catholic, the stories and the St. Patrick's Day parties and all of that. But O'Neill would go back to Boston and say, he's a nice fella, but he's kicking the hell out of me. And he was just cutting everything. And it really didn't do any good till Clinton came in. Now that's a very partisan statement, but if you just look at that, the good times were in the 90s and the bad times were in the 80s. Well, whenever that happens, they say, well, it started under the old guy. And so our current president, George W. Bush, said, well, the slip in the economy started under Clinton, so they overlap. So so Reagan comes in, and immediately there's the hostility to Washington again. See, this bad place. And it resonates so well with the folks back home. Mm-hmm. And Nancy she was Queen Nancy, and she ordered new china for the White House. And so I said something about it's the average household, the average home in America, you got plastic dishes and good people, but at the White House it's good dishes and plastic people, something like that. But he was the only president who ever invited my wife and me to the White House for a state dinner. And the Reagans would have a little more variety in their guest list. They would have show folks and people like that, a little wider variety. And so I guess that's why we're invited. And you don't forget a night like that. You do if you go to all of them, if you're a cabinet member, ho-hum, another night at the White House. But when you're at a state dinner, you get so seduced. I mean, the food is better than you've ever had in a restaurant. The Marine Orchestra is playing for dancing. The trappings, walking into the East Room, shaking hands with this particular night, it was a state dinner for the president of Argentina. And so when you walk in there, you go by, there's a cluster of media. And you just, you don't have to say anything to them. You just keep right on going, which many assume to do. But me, I mean, I had to stop. I knew them all. And I said something like, I know what you're thinking. You're wondering, what am I doing here? Well, President of Argentina and I are very tight. See, I'm doing that. And and I went through the reception. And then I said to the Reagans, could you tell the media out there that I'm not here because of computer error? And then later on, during the dancing, my wife and I are dancing, and the Reagans dance up next to us. And they said, what was that you told us in the reception? And I wanted to get that straight. And you don't forget that. During dinner, I'm seated with Barbara Bush. That's when she still liked me. And she's the wife of the vice president. And then I tell Bush the old Pia Zadora joke about Pia Zadora, the mediocre actress who talks her agent into getting her something substantive. So he gets her a part in a dinner theater production of The Diary of Anne Frank. And she's terrible in this thing. She's so terrible that in the last act, when the German soldiers break into the house, the audience starts yelling out, "She's in the attic," and that joke. So Bush says, "Oh, that's great. You got to tell that to the president," And you're on these intimate terms with these people, and you don't believe it's happening, and yet there's a part of me saying, "I shouldn't even be here. I'll lose my shingle. I have to hang up my shingle as a political satirist." And sure enough, you get so seduced. The next day, I didn't have an irreverent thought. I couldn't write beans the next day. But I just reclined on the sofa till the feeling passed and resume my ordinary self again. But the point is that you can see how the place can seduce you. So when you work there on a daily basis, you've got to feel superior. Yeah. It's all right to say, well, I'm in with the people out there. But no, you're not with the people out there. You're in the White House. You're working in the White House, and you're being seduced, and you think you can get away with a couple of things. And that's what happens. So I didn't pay my income tax for the next 3 years. By the way, I just show you how secure I am. You never hear a comedian talking about their taxes. You know why? Their accountants tell them not to. Because you're just inviting the audit.
That's right. No question. That's it. We'll keep this our private stuff.
Yes.
The things like the economics, I'm thinking of Stockman. He was Reagan's guy.
David Stockman was the budget director.
Right.
He was a punchline. Isn't that funny? I mean, these people we forgot about. I had to think for a second who you were talking about. David Stockman. They come and they go. You've seen them. Greg, you've seen them come and go. They come into Jamestown. I chew them up and spit them out. But David Stockman, he was the budget director. He was the one with the bad news. He had to come to Reagan about a year into the administration and tell him that his tax cuts and his budget cuts don't cut the deficit. I'm tempted to say, duh, you know, but I'm too old. Duh.
Whatever you do in front of the camera, don't do that.
But anyway, Stockman, and so he was from Michigan. He had been a congressman from Michigan, Jerry Ford's old district, I think, up there. And he left town, and then he got a job that pays us $500,000 a year, I guess.
But he was sort of a wonder kid for a short period of time.
He was kind of an intellectual, if a House member can be an intellectual. But he was the whipping boy. He was the guy you went after instead of Reagan, and for the. See, that's about when presidents no longer had honeymoons. Used to be that the first 6 months was hands off, give them a honeymoon, but no more. No more. So you went after Stockman.
Relationship Reagan had with Gorbachev and that whole Iron Curtain coming down. How did you deal with that? This sort of a happy days are now here again, or?
Yeah, Gorby came to town. It was wonderful, and this was the. We noticed Mrs. Gorbachev, and she didn't look like any of the other wives of Russian leaders. And my wife noted, Raisa, my wife noted that Raisa Gorbachev was the first wife of a Russian leader to weigh less than he did.
That's right.
And it was true. And so, and again, I guess only a Republican could do that. Only a Republican could have a cozying up to communists, like when Nixon opened up China. And they worked it out. And there's this theory, well, when Reagan died, they said, well, Reagan ended the Cold War, and Reagan brought down the Berlin Wall, and Reagan gave us peace in our land. And yeah, he did. And those who don't want to give him full credit say, well, yeah, but what it was also, the Pope had a hand in that too. Even a partisan like Carl Bernstein of Woodward and Bernstein wrote a whole book about Reagan, about the Pope's role in ending the Cold War with Reagan. And then also there was Bill Casey of the CIA, and then there was Lech Walesa, the president of Poland, and say all ahead of time. So Gorby comes to town. It's a big day, and there's a big motorcade going down Connecticut Avenue during the lunch hour, and Gorbachev really causes a major problem for logistics when he tells his driver to stop. He wants to get out of the car and shake hands with the people, with the American people. Now, as it happened, now there's 100 cars behind him, and he stops everything. And as it happened, he was right in the front of a restaurant. It was a very, very popular restaurant called Duke Ziebert's. And he wants to shake hands with the people. These are people coming in and out of Duke Ziebert's. And these plain folks he wants to meet are lobbyists and senators and congressmen and judges. And that was sort of a private joke among us, that these are the real people. So there was a balcony in this restaurant, and Duke Ziebert, who was a very popular, jovial restaurateur, walks out to the window and he yells down, "Hey Gorby, come on up, we got borscht." So he really made a nice impression on all of us, and then they got together and they drew up this thing, and it was so. they had their treaty, and they signed their treaty, and they only got rid of a small percentage of the total number of missiles that still exist today in the hands of the leaders. These are all separate nations now, of the leaders of Ukraine. They were all in Ukraine, so we should have attacked Ukraine, maybe. We know where their weapons of mass destruction. They're there, folks.
Reagan then begets George Bush Sr. As a caricature, you don't see him as much as a Reagan or ultimately a Clinton.
No.
Was there much there to work with?
I know what you say to work with.
Yeah.
To me, there was, but I know that the guys who do impressions had trouble.
Hello.
Wait,
Are they here? Still here? Have they left? Look at them all. Look at you. We got Woody.
Yeah.
Greg,
How you doing?
what
Do you have
we're
anything
trying to do a
can you
show.
talk?
No!
We're trying
We're
to
taping.
tape
Jeez.
Wait, what was that?
This will be magic. I can't wait.
I see it going downhill right from here. I'm gonna move my chair.
But there was there is a segue here.
Is there? Oh, good.
It could have been Lassie.
You want to close the other door, please?
Yeah, we're trying to do a.
Thank you.
What was that? This is like Howdy Doody in the peanut gallery.
Yeah, it's a good thing. I don't have much on Bush. I know the Impressionists had trouble imitating him. They couldn't latch on his voice. His voice, he was, and the cartoonists too. He was just too normal looking, and his voice didn't have any quirks or distinctive characteristics at all. We tried to make a preppy out of him, which he was. It was less believable that he was a Texan. Mm-hmm. With his son, the president now, yeah, he shucks and jives and drops his INGs to an annoying extent and does the Texas thing, because he was moved there when he was a young boy. But the old man, no. The old man is Andover and Yale and Ivy League and blue blood. And so when he became a Texan, it was a little more contrived. But I'm just what he. Oh yeah, a year before the election. Now he was elected in Bush Sr. in 88. And so there was a big debate. They have these debates a year before the election where all of the dark horses run. And so in 88, it was Bush Sr. and Howard Baker. And believe it or not, even Harold Stassen, who had been running since the 40s for president, he was still running in 88, early on. But this was 87. And there were others that day. And I didn't really know Bush. But all I said about him, I said, look at him, ladies and gentlemen. He's going to be hard to remember, whether he becomes president or not, because he looks like everybody else. And I could tell he didn't like that. It was a little embarrassing. And then to make matters worse for him, the next morning, they drove me back to the airport. This was in, forget where it was, Indianapolis, I think. And so there's a staffer, and I'm put in the car with the staffer, and there's no other vehicles available. So they put George Bush in the back seat with these two peons, the staffer and myself. And what is it, a 20-minute ride, half-hour ride, and he sat between us, and he took out a newspaper, and he didn't say one word all the way out. And I thought, boy, he's really ticked off, you know. But I gotta say that later on, he got into the rhythm of it, and he knew that that he had to be perceived as taking a joke, and it wasn't just with me. I'm not saying it with everybody. Whenever he was around me, from then on, slap on the back, how you doing, joke around like that. And as I said, he was the one I told the joke. He said, oh, that's a great joke, tell it to Reagan. Mm-hmm. And so he always was like that. And Barbara Bush, on two occasions, the Republican convention in '88 and then the one in '92, she invited me to entertain at the Women's Republican Luncheon. One of them was one of the women at that dinner, at that lunch, was the only black at that lunch.
Really?
Shirley Temple Black.
You got sucked right into that.
But anyway, so Barbara liked me in those days, and I noticed that David Broder made a speech here at Chautauqua a couple days ago and said he was socially friendly with the Bushes, and then when he ran for president, he explained, well, as a journalist, we can't be friends, but then later we can. And then Barbara said, no, you can't, Buster. Once you step outside, you're not getting back in.
Did your paths cross with her at Chautauqua? She was here for a week, I know.
No.
It was, no.
No.
Were you surprised when the Bill Clinton, it really was kind of a long shot at the time when he ran against Bush, and ultimately out of Arkansas, somewhat similar to Georgia, came up and kind of. And also, I got to probably also ask about Ross Perot, a name that we should probably throw into the mix here, because I think that was that time period.
Ross Perot was 92.
92?
And 96.
96.
Yeah.
But specifically 92, we were, from the pointing and the figures, the economics, that must have been fun times for you.
You know, for years, the cliche was that we could never have an ugly president. The only reason Abraham Lincoln became president because there was no television. We don't think of Lincoln as being ugly, but at the time he was portrayed as a baboon and in cartoons, but I think that's a phony assessment, but that's what you always heard. And then when Ross Perot came along, it said, well, yeah, he's not a very handsome man, but he's so rich he can buy his way into the White House if he really tried hard enough, and he tried hard enough, but he was unsuccessful, and he ran as an independent, and he had this funny voice. See? Remember his voice? Yeah. Ross Perot, right? And he looked like a little guy who just fell off of a charm bracelet. See, those are the brilliant portrayals of him. And he got 19% of the vote, I believe, in Utah, and he got a big percentage in Alaska. But otherwise, his was the fate of all independents. They only get more than about nationally 8%, something like that. John Anderson, others. But he was in that race. And in 92, I voted for him in 92. And I've talked to other people, and they agree with me, as nutty as he was, and he was nutty. I mean, he thought that the CIA tried to disrupt his daughter's wedding. Mm-hmm. Remember that? Texans say, how do you disrupt a Texas wedding? You know, say the bride has no business wearing white or something like that. And but he made a speech the night before that for some reason I was so sick of the others. I was so sick of Clinton. I was so sick of Bush. Now I put myself in the role of a citizen. I don't... Yes, I'm a comedian, but I'm also a man. with a vote. So I was so tired of these other guys, I was so sick of the campaign, that Perot made a speech that night, and he made sense to me. And I thought, okay, all right, damn it, I'll vote for you, you little twerp. And I did. And I have, I've had other people tell me, yeah, me too. Me too. I don't remember what he said, but the timing was right, so the heck with it. Mm-hmm. So he was a factor in there. Kind of a romantic story. He was head of this company that he started, EDS, data processing, and two of his people were kidnapped by Iranians. They had a contract with the Iranian government to do their data processing. And he sent some guys out of his own office who had had military training. They practiced in the parking lot of EDS in Dallas how they were going to get these hostages out. And they got them out. This was a year before the major hostage situation. But they did. They got them out. So that's he was an interesting guy, Perot. He the rap against him was that he would run the country like a corporation. You just think you can press a button and things are going to happen. So that was part of it.
But because he was in the mix, it ultimately led to, I guess, somewhat of a surprise, and Bill Clinton rolls into town. Did you really know much about him?
All we knew about Clinton was his disastrous speech at the convention 4 years earlier, where he wasn't the keynote speaker. He introduced the nominee, Anyway, it was so boring.
Yes.
That he was hooted off the stage when he's Dukakis, the nominee. Thank you. And he was so boring that when he said, and in conclusion, this cheer went up, this sarcastic cheer. So how did he save himself? Why didn't he go down the memory hole of oblivion in American politics? How did he do that? He went on the Carson show and laughed at himself. Mm-hmm. And Carson helped him because he introduced Clinton, and as minute Clinton sat down, Carson pulled out an hourglass. You got a minute. And then he played the saxophone. And so that's a little lesson there. Just get back on the horse immediately. And that's what he did. But the other debaters, the other wannabes, there was Senator Harkin of Iowa, there was Jerry Brown of California, and others. But
boy, been hearing the name Jerry Brown. He's still around. Did he run for mayor of San Francisco or something?
He was mayor of Oakland for a couple of years, and I think as we speak now, he's running for attorney general. He's just a political animal. Has the bug, you know. He always good television.
Oh yeah.
Always provocative. He had the goods on Clinton before the national media did on the Whitewater business and these questionable tactics down in Arkansas. Jerry Brown did his homework on that. Nothing came of those stories. Nothing need have come of those stories because it was before the fat chick walked in with the pizza.
Speaking of which, the Monica Gate, that had to have been just an incredible source of information for you and other satirists to play with it. And did you see it coming? Had the Monica, before it hit public television, had that been sort of an underlying theme in Washington?
No. I found out about it the day everybody did. January 20th, 98. I was in Toledo. And his press secretary, what was his name, is almost ready to dive under the desk with these questions. The media had picked up on this Lewinsky factor. There was that Linda Tripp who spilled the beans. Mike McCurry is the press secretary. The worst day in the history of any White House press secretary. So I'm watching TV in Cleveland, or in Toledo, I guess, watching this. No, I didn't know about it. I guess I don't get stuff leaked to me at all very often, and I didn't know about it. Look, I hated this story. I hated it. No comedian should be proud of the stuff that they did during that story because it was so easy, just too easy. And I hate it when guys who don't do politics, when the kid in the comedy club talking about his drugs and his dog and his relationships all of a sudden has his Monica Lewinsky routine. See, so you feel encroached upon. It's a snob attitude on my part, but that's the way. It's just too easy, and it's just all over the place. And I could have done. In fact, I reached the point. It was like Watergate. I reached the point where I probably had a whole show on just that and all of the ramifications on it. And my daughter met Clinton once, and my daughter is an attractive woman who at the time was in her 30s. And she and other women have said the same thing, that when Bill Clinton meets an attractive woman, his eyebrows go like that. This creepy kind of and that's a consensus. You get a consensus with women like that. I had a conversation with them. They had a reception at the White House for public television people. It was some kind of a anniversary or something. And this was before Lewinsky. I think it was in his first term, really. And so somebody said, "Did you talk to the president yet?" And I said, "No, he's just so surrounded by people. This was a stand-up reception." I said, I don't know how to do that." And this was somebody who worked on the staff. He said, "Well, I'll introduce you." So you come over, and so it's always awkward. So what do I have to do now? I have to stop talking to these people and talk to this guy, and what is he going to tell me a joke, or are we going to? And so they were talking about the balanced budget amendment, and that was it. So I thought, all right, and so Mr. President, do you know Mark Russell? He's, "Oh yeah, yeah. We were talking about the balanced budget amendment." So now, geez. Which is nice, because every other president I ever met, or every other public figure in my life I ever met, they got to tell me a joke. They either, "Hey, I got a joke for you," or they'll say, "Tell me a joke." But he said, "We were talking about the balanced budget amendment." So I said, "Well," now my daughter was there. I took my daughter. In fact, I think this is when he raised his eyebrow. And so they're all standing around waiting for me. He's thrown me this, it's in my court. And I said something like, and I knew he was against the amendment, a constitutional amendment to force the budget to be balanced. And I said, "Well, Mr. President, And by the way, that is such an ego trip to say that expression, Mr. President. How often do you get to say that? How often in your life? Never. Mr. President, and you kind of mumble it as if you say it a lot. So I said to him, Mr. President, so that's quite a trip to say that. So, Mr. President, I said, to me, the balanced budget amendment would be like prohibition. The 18th Amendment or whatever it was. Making the Pentagon to be like a speakeasy where you'd have to go to them if you want to buy an illegal aircraft carrier under the table. See? And he said, well, yeah, you do make us laugh, but like that, see? I was trying to be funny. Well, you do make us laugh, and then he's on to something else, and then a couple of people. And so I'm standing with him there for about a minute and a half, which is a long time in a whole room full of people. And I come over to my daughter and I said, did I look like a rabbit caught in the headlights just then? And she said, Dad, worse. She said, you looked worse. But I sat next to Mrs. Reagan one time, and at a banquet. And this is when she was, her message, her theme was drugs. Just say no on drugs. And there was an issue about giving the Coast Guard more money so they could build more AWACS, where these AWAKS, which stood for something to do with radar detecting Coast Guard vessels, see. And so Mrs. Reagan engages me in a serious conversation. And drugs, see. I don't know if she said, what do you think about drugs or something like that, but the subject came up, and I said, well, this is relevant to this bill that's up in Congress now. I didn't say that your husband is against, but I said this appropriation to increase the budget of the Coast Guard for AWACS, which would enable them to detect drug-bearing vessels coming into this country. Aha! And she said, well, what I like to do is more along the lines of public relations to get the message out there, which would apply to, and then she actually reached over and touched me on the nose. She said, a message that in the popular culture and comedians like that, meaning comedians who talk about drugs in a positive way, joke about in this fun taking drugs, kids like that, comedian. But my point is that if you have a 5-second or a 1-minute conversation with the president, you're going to remember that for the rest of their life, of your life. And they got to know this. They must know that 5 seconds on the rope line, hey, how you doing today? 60 years later, that kid at the rope line is going to tell her grandchildren, the president said to me, how you doing today? See this hand? He shook this hand. What a burden. Your small talk is magnified to the Gettysburg Address.
Mm-hmm. This guy is so good. This guy is so good. Okay, we're going to pause here for a second because my wife had...
Shook hands.
This is Bush, right?
Yeah, and then he stopped at Dingell. And I was sitting with Alan Simpson. And I said, what do you think they're saying to each other up there? And so, oh, they're just saying, you don't shit me, I won't shit you. Well,
George Bush Jr. here, the younger. Is it too early to really kind of have a reflection not only on his history, but even your relationship with him via your act? He's been at this now for 5 years, or is this... Well, let me back up from the question. As you look at all the presidents, the continuum, we've talked from Eisenhower right now to George the Younger. Which one did you, were you most remorseful when they left the presidency?
oh, remorseful when they left. Well,
I say that in a comedic sense.
yeah, I know. That's all anybody wants from me is... well, when they leave, when a new guy comes in, that's the question. When a new guy comes in, everybody says to me, boy, you're going to have a field day. I don't know where that expression came. A field day. That's like a three-legged race at a picnic or something, a softball. It means a good time. You're going to have a field day with this new president. Every single president in my public life, you're going to have a field day. I said, why? Say Reagan came in. You're going to have a field day with Reagan. Well, why is that? Well, you know, he's an actor. I said, okay, that's 30 seconds right there. Now, what about the rest of my career? I've doing a 1-hour show. See? All right, Jimmy Carter, hey, you're going to have a field day. Why is that? Oh, you're a peanut farmer. See? And so with Bush, well, cowboy. And so the thing is that you don't know if you're going to have a field day or not. As it turns out, there's always something funny. Yes, that's part of our democracy, and it's no president ever let me down. But you don't know yet. You're at the mercy of events. You play off of what they do and what they say. Richard Nixon, probably the most hated president since I've been at this, never personally bothered me. I was taken off after Bush there. Somebody might be watching this and say, well, what's so funny about that? Sirius is easy, and that was a luxury for me, not because I wanted to bash the president, but it's the first time it's easy to be serious. That's my point. When you asked Phil Donahue the other night, you said, what would you like your legacy to be? And he gave a heartfelt, sincere, what do you want his legacy to be? I'd like to be the guy that just said he spoke his mind and he was honest and all that. I can't do that. See, I can't get away with that because it would be pompous. See, I could start, but I would get into a, well, I'd like to be remembered as a man, and that's why a little while ago you asked me that, and then I took a rather smutty way out, and then but even if I tried, well, I'd like to. I can't do it. I can't. So I would say he had 535 writers, 100 in the Senate, and 435 in the House of Representatives. And his piano playing was never as bad as it sounded.
That's good. That is really good. As you look at the field coming up, I know it's not that far away, as painful as it is to talk about it here in 2006, that the 2008 election is forthcoming. We are going to have a new president. And as you look at the cast of characters...
When you say we're going to have a new president, then you're assuming that we have one now.
Well, technically we do.
See what I should have... see how guilty I feel about being so angry about Bush a little while ago. I should have just made a joke. We're living in a time when a Democrat lies to Congress, it's called perjury. When a Republican lies to Congress, it's called the State of the Union Address. Okay, it'll be Hillary versus McCain. It'll be very dirty. Most of the hatred for Hillary will come from women. It's true. Most Hillary haters I know are the kind of people who, if they could ask Hillary one question, it would be, why didn't you kill him?
And that's from the heart.
Yeah. But I think that will be the race after a lot of bitterness and the charade of the conventions. And that'll be it, and McCain will win.
Because of the chemistry against Hillary, as opposed to...
No, because I just said he would.
I'm glad we're getting this now, you know?
Hillary is very smart. I guess a woman. The Republicans have to be the first with everything. They opened up China. They ended the Cold War, and so it's got to be a Republican woman for president. Doesn't have to be, but that's the first. And Hillary is she's moving to the right, not to the right, but to the center, a little bit to the right. So she, a few months ago, introduced a ban on flag burning, which is pandering, really. And her co-sponsor of the legislation was one of the senators from Utah. So I figure Hillary will carry Utah the day that the Great Salt Lake turns into 80-proof Jack Daniels. McCain never had a lot of material on McCain, really. Kind of. I don't know that anybody else has either. I don't. I don't see anybody on Saturday Night Live doing McCain. He's not that easy.
Do you enjoy the primary season just because
the primaries?
So many
The primaries I enjoy. I loathe the conventions. We stopped having good leaders, good conventions, when they stopped smoking and drinking whiskey in the open in the convention hall. It's been downhill ever since. And the idea of everything being a foregone conclusion months before the convention. And so I just, and I went to every convention from 72 to 2000 and to 2000. That was the last one. Didn't go to 2004.
Your idea was they would ask
It's too hard to move. You can't. It's like an armed camp. It's not fun. Not fun.
Did you do much with Richard Daley's Chicago Democratic Convention in 1968?
I wasn't there. I was still in my formative years. They have the time of their life. I saw a cop, he beat up my wife in Chicago.
Yeah, he's just such a wealth of knowledge here. Hey, you can't believe there's actually somebody here who would remember Wayne Morse, you know, at my young age. But again, when you think of guys that are, well, Daley is a national figure, not a Washington figure, but that's sort of where you from the political side, is that's sort of your boundary, because you got to play with your audience, which is principally a fairly well-educated audience. It's an audience which
They are, but you lose them no matter who you mention, other than the president or the vice president.
Mhm.
People don't know who their congressmen are. I'll ask them if I go to a city. Chamber of Commerce. Guy picks me up at the airport. I'll test him. I know who the congressman is, but I'll say, "Who's your congressman?" These are people in the game.
Right.
They have to think. Maybe they'll name a state senator or something like that. I say, "Who's your senator?" And then they'll name a state senator. And people don't know.
Are there crowds of which you readily accept and look forward to working with, as opposed to other ones which just is sort of they pay the freight and you go, but you're not necessarily excited about? Maybe a loaded question, but it's.
I always shied away from the mafia. I'm serious. There's an organization in New York City, the construction trades. Again, I wouldn't say this on Meet the Press, but all due respect. And I've checked this out with other people. They have a big banquet at the Waldorf Astoria every December. All men, tuxedos, ladies of leisure waiting in the suites upstairs.
Mhm.
Fist fights breaking out, bottle of whiskey on every table. Guys with 28-inch necks.
Mhm.
And I was lucky to get out alive. I did that, and I've talked to other performers who've done that same gig, and that's bad news. I love Unitarians. Give me a Unitarian crowd. I love them because they're open-minded. They're mostly converts from the more scheduled airlines, and I love them. They laugh at themselves. The only time we were out at a Unitarian church they ever heard the word Jesus Christ is when the janitor fell down the stairs. They love that stuff, I love teachers and librarians, and doctors are good, lawyers are good, great. The little.com 30-somethings in their venture capital companies, not good.
Yeah.
Not good. No. You feel that you are subjecting them to 45-minute cell phone deprivation.
Probably true. Is it also a sense that their world has become, and I see that even with my kids who got all these degrees, but from a worldly perspective, from just general talk of the economy, of the politics, Zippo. And that's, in order to really appreciate the full Mark Russell, you have to have that broad-based knowledge.
Well, there's this theory, David Broder, I think it was, touched on it the other day, maybe, that teenagers, soon to be adults, and adults, young adults, focusing on one thing is not what they are natural at, because they're, I think the way he described, they'll be watching a movie on television and playing a computer game, or they're talking on the cell phone or text messaging all at the same time.
Multitasking, yeah.
All the time. See? And so to sit and focus on one individual for 45 minutes, no. That gets into the whole media issue, the whole idea of the anything electronic is going to take precedent over a piece of paper you hold in your hand.
And yet that's your source, principal source of material, right? Is the printed word?
Well, it's just there. It comes to the door every morning, and I grab it.
Right.
But I also turn on the thing and match the two, and that's it. But sitting, reading bloggers all day long, no. No.
Talk show? Do you get much from that? Whether it's Imus, Howard Stern, or wherever it happened to?
Imus is fine. From 7:30 to 8. So if he's on for the rest of the time is just guys grab ass, towel snapping, guys in the locker room, guys in the bar. Very effective, big audience, huge, but more interesting, the more interesting guests, and he would admit that, between 7:30 and 8. That's it.
I guess along that whole media front, you've seen the Walter Cronkites, the Eric Severides, the Brinkley, the McNeil. Are there folks that you simply say, not only did I trust them, but I really look to them for the news?
Well, we're discussing this as we speak, just a few days before Katie Couric makes her debut as the evening news anchor on CBS. And it's a big deal. There's a lot of hype, and it's in a couple of days. Why should it matter who comes into my home with the bad news? See? If the Grim Reaper looks like Katie, it's still the Grim Reaper. So if an ugly old guy tells me that a tree has just crushed my car, am I going to say, get away, ugly old guy, I want Katie to tell me? Why should it matter? It's ridiculous. And so, see, Katie's supporters would say that she is a television pioneer, anchor, on network news, a woman, respected. Her detractors will tell you that she's America's cutie pie, waving her pom-poms. To me, she is someone who leaves me with my crushed car and then goes to a commercial.
In your 50s, I'm kind of putting that I'm not even sure I even knew whether there were even television anchors at that time. Was Cronkite really the first to popularize that anchor?
Cronkite and I forget the chronology, Huntley and Brinkley on NBC. David Brinkley and Chet Huntley. Now there were others before that. It was John Cameron Swayze before Huntley and Brinkley, and Chet Edwards, I believe. I forget his name. Edwards. Before Cronkite. Douglas Edwards. Thank you. Before Cronkite. Before about 1962, the network news was 15 minutes long, and so your entire news was a half hour, 15 minutes network, 15 minutes local, period. So you say, well, why was that? My answer is not that much happened. They covered it all. 15 minutes. Can you imagine that? And then it was John Cameron Swayze. It wasn't called the NBC News. It was called the Camel Caravan. Camel cigarettes. And the show would end. He'd say, good evening. And he'd turn and start playing on his Remington typewriter. A typewriter, boys and girls. And the camera would zoom in on the typewriter, and leaning against the typewriter was a pack of Camel cigarettes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the first of what we now see in movies all the time. Are these pop-ups, with the cocaine?
No, yeah, I know what you mean. No, that wasn't it was Well, they used to call it product placement, but they were the sponsor.
Right.
They were the sponsor. They used to do lead-in. Johnny Carson one time had a new sponsor, Smucker's Jelly. And then the host would do a lead-in for the commercial. They don't do that anymore. But so Carson said that we have a new sponsor we'd like to welcome to the show. And Smucker's Jelly. With a name like Smucker's, it has to be good. With a name like Smucker's, it better be. And they canceled the next day.
Did they really?
Yes.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. Well, I see Smucker's just gave a large grant to the Chautauqua Institute.
Well, it's got to be good.
Got to be good. Got to be good. Of the late night folks, you worked late nights. Did you even have any reason to ever?
No, I went years without ever seeing any of those shows. Ever. One time, I planned my show one night so I could watch Carson. And I watched his monologue, which is 8-10 minutes long. And I wrote down two of the biggest ones. And I went downstairs and told them, stole. Didn't do it any other time. Never kept it in the act. Not that stupid. But out of curiosity. Mm-hmm. See? And this is my audience. And I did those lines, and I didn't get a laugh.
Really?
Yeah.
Does that tell you a little bit about the expectation of audience and the type of material they're looking to Mark Russell for?
Wasn't fair to the people, wasn't fair to Carson. I guess it was just a curiosity. The only time I ever did it, you're the first person I ever told about that.
I'm honored.
But
It took 3 hours to wear him down to get to this.
yeah. But it's just a thing I did. No, it's just it's having to be there, the mood. Those people in the Carson and those shows are taped at 5:30 in the afternoon, mm-hmm. And so here it was almost midnight when I did it. And so,
what do you think would happen if you did an act where you just did total stand up and no piano playing? Is that such an integral part of your routine?
It is. People expect it. I've done things without the piano, banquets, but not a whole show. You get up in a roast or something like that, and I've done that, but they expect it. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't. They'd say, "We'll only pay you half."
When you go someplace, do you have a type of piano you require?
Just a grand.
Grand piano.
Yeah, because. See, I need a grand. Marvin Hamlish can play an accordion. He could get a half-size keyboard and sound great on it. But I need that big grand piano. But it just fills out the stage more. Yeah, that's all I ask for. It's all I ask. Doesn't even have to be in tune, because I sing out of key anyway, so.
Historically, how has the Chautauqua audience been for you? Do you find them to be because they're, I guess I'm going to say this, a higher intellectual crowd? Is that more challenging for you?
The Chautauqua audience in the summer and Ford's Theater in Washington in the winter are in a category by themselves. It's really not fair to the other audiences, I suppose, because at Chautauqua they're so good. You say a joke, get a 10, and well, at the 10 is always going to get a 10. It's the broadest one. Mm-hmm. Great Salt Lake turning into 80 proof Jack Daniels. Mm-hmm. That's going to work all the time. But then there are jokes that are a 6. This is too methodical. This is a boring subject. This is dissecting humor, thereby destroying the thing in the process. as E.B. White pointed out. But, so the 10 always gets a 10. Chautauqua, an 8 at Chautauqua might be a 4 someplace else. And a 4 at Chautauqua would be dead silence someplace else for the venturecapitalist.com guys. So they are, plus there's 5,000 of them, so there's strength in those numbers, and they're open-minded. And they're all, it's funny, they're not as liberal as they think they are. They'll go for the, they'll take it either way. They'll you know, Hillary, everything. They're just broad-minded people. If they weren't, they would go to a summer resort where they just played golf and sat on the beach and let their brains turn to garbanzo beans.
Knowing you've got that kind of audience, does that cause you to reshape what might be a normal night?
No, but it it lets me know that what normally might take an hour on stage will run to an hour and a half at Chautauqua, because you're more relaxed and the laughs are longer, and that's what it tells me. But and when you're that relaxed and you're that confident, then you can ad-lib more things off the cuff. And it gets to be a conversation instead of just struggling through from one line to the other and let me get out of here.
Do you get much folks from the audience say, either tell the Clinton story, or do you get, I don't want to say hecklers, but suggesters?
When that happens, they might ask for the joke and give away the punchline when they ask for it.
And so you just laugh and then say it's already given?
Yeah.
Did everybody get that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's songs, you know, there's a couple of old songs that I do at parties, and and they ask for those that I've really thrown out, because out of just embarrassment to do them again, but I do those, a couple of them.
At the St. Patrick's Day party?
Yeah.
Woody, I gotta tell you, this is quite a few hours of Mark indulging me.
You want to know exactly how many? This is 3, 4, 7 hours.
7 hours. On behalf of your family, they're gonna appreciate this, because that's where it will end up, copies of this.
Well, I'm glad they'll see it, my kids, because they never call.
And those little things about your life that...
And they never knew what I did either. They're learning what I do for the first time. They think I'm in the CIA.
Do they come in the audience? I mean...
Yeah.
Well, his sister comes all the way up from, where she live, D.C.? Patrick?
Yeah, I've had the grandkids too, and I have one granddaughter. I've got 6 grandsons, 1 granddaughter. So the granddaughter last year was about 6, and they brought her to this show I did in Phoenix, and I had a song about